Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu decided to halt the judicial reforms in the wake of the massive protests that took place last week. In response, over 100,000 right-wing protesters demonstrated in front of the Knesset building. I'm Justin, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, you know what to do. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on our channel or below this video. Also, leave us a like and a comment. Share our content across all social media platforms. We want to get our content out to as many people as possible so people can hear the truth of what is happening in Israel. There's not much truth on the mainstream media these days, as you guys absolutely know. Also, make sure to go follow us on social media. We're on the major platforms: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go give us a follow on those. We're trying to grow those right now, so we would really appreciate it if you would go give us a follow there. Guys, there's one more chance to come a rally for the Biblical Heartland. We had our first two Biblical Heartland rallies in Nashville and in Houston, and those went very, very well. Lots of people came and they connected with our speakers there. I've heard that they went really well. But there's one more chance. Tomorrow night, there is one more rally in Dallas, Texas. You can go RSVP right now. Go to theisraelguys.com/rally, or you can click the link in the description below. Bring a couple friends. Go sign up for this rally. Israel needs your support more than ever. I'd like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Israeli Good Wine. This year, celebrate Passover with wine from Israel direct to your door in a Passover Seder box or just a box of wine. You can find out more by clicking the link in the description below, or get yours today at passover.israeligoodwine.com. The link will be in the description below. Hundreds of thousands of people have been protesting the past week. If you've been following news about Israel, I'm sure you've seen a lot about protests going on. Just I did a full show on Monday about the full update of what is happening in Israel with the judicial reforms and in regards to that. But Netanyahu made a statement after that show. In the statement, he said he was deciding to halt the judicial reforms, at least for now. So it might look like Netanyahu is caving to the pressure of the protesters. Maybe he is. But it could also be pressure from the international community, especially from the Biden administration. They've been very vocal about this in their criticism of the judicial reforms. They've said they're very concerned. So Netanyahu said he's halting this at least until the summer session of the Knesset. Part of the statement that Netanyahu said, here, I'll read it here. He said, quote, "There's an extreme minority that is ready to tear our country into parts. It tends towards violence. It ignites fire. It threatens to harm elected officials. It talks about civil war, and it calls for insubordination, which is a terrible crime." Later on, he went on to say, "We are now on a path towards a very dangerous collision in Israeli society, which jeopardizes the basic unity between us. And such a crisis obligates all of us to act responsibly. Out of national responsibility, out of a desire to prevent a rift in the nation, I've decided to postpone the second and third reading of the law in this session of the Knesset in order to give time to try to reach a wide agreement on the legislation in the next session of the Knesset. This way, we will bring about a reform that will restore the balance which has been lost while maintaining and even strengthening human and individual rights." So he's not saying he's completely freezing it, but he's postponing it. That's what he's saying. He's postponing it at least until the summer session. I think he's just trying to maybe give time for things to calm down. You know, there's a lot of tensions rising, hundreds of thousands of protesters taking to the streets, sort of out of their mind, you could say. They're very upset, very angry. So it appears that Netanyahu is just trying to give time for things to calm down, for people maybe to see clearer. Of course, after this announcement, the Israeli left celebrated like crazy. The Biden administration, they also welcomed this announcement. Here's a clip from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
So we welcome this announcement as an opportunity to create additional time and space for compromise. Compromise is precisely what we have been calling for. And we continue to strongly urge Israeli leaders to find a compromise as soon as possible.
So yesterday, President Biden said he was very concerned about what Netanyahu is doing. He was about to get on a flight on Air Force One, and some reporters asked him about this. Here's a clip of him talking here.
Like many strong supporters of Israel, I'm very concerned. And I'm concerned that they get this straight. They cannot continue down this road. And I've sort of made that clear. Hopefully, the Prime Minister will act in a way that he's going to try to work out some genuine compromise, but that remains to be seen.
Are you inviting Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House, sir?
No.
Will you be coming to Washington?
Not in the near term.
Biden, I have a message for you. Seems to me that you should try to run your own country first before trying to run Israel. Maybe let's just see if you can handle America, which you're having a very hard time with, before you try to help Israel and try to run their country. I thought Itamar Ben-Gvir had the perfect response. So he did a radio interview this morning. And in the interview, he said this. He said, quote, "We respect the democratic system there in the U.S., but they need to understand that Israel is an independent country and not just another star on the American flag. It needs to be clear to countries around the world the people here had an election and expressed their will." Guys, Itamar Ben-Gvir absolutely nailed it here. He was 100% right. The people of Israel spoke. They democratically elected this government, and that's where the protest, like, you've heard a lot about the hundreds of thousands of protests in the streets of Israel. But what about the millions of people that voted for this government? What about that protest? Netanyahu also responded to what President Biden said. He was a lot more political. He said this, quote, "I have known President Biden for over 40 years, and I appreciate his longstanding commitment to Israel. The alliance between Israel and the United States is unbreakable and always overcomes the occasional disagreements between us." Occasional. My administration is committed to strengthening democracy by restoring the proper balance between the three branches of government, which we are striving to achieve via a broad consensus. Israel is a sovereign country which makes its decisions by the will of its people and not based on pressures from abroad, including from the best of friends. So he's saying we're going to do what the people voted for, by what the people want, not based on what the U.S. wants, which is really great. Also, we talked about restoring the proper balance between the three branches of governments. That's all about what the judicial reforms are, trying to take some of the power from the Supreme Court, which is absolutely acting like a dictatorship at this point. So they're trying to make checks and balances. They're trying to restore the balance in the government, which makes perfect sense. Guys, the right finally decided to speak up. They finally had enough. So at the same time that the anti-reform protesters, the hundreds of thousands, were still protesting. They were calling for the country to shut down. They were calling on all these different organizations, businesses to go on strike to try to shut down the country. They even got the airport to close for a little while, and they wanted the medical system to close down. But the people who are actually for the judicial reforms, the right-wingers, the conservatives, the majority of the country who voted in this government, who voted for Netanyahu, for Ben-Gvir, for all those people, they decided to speak up. So Itamar Ben-Gvir, several other leaders, they put out tweets. They calling for the right to stand up and protest. The tweet read something like this. It was in Hebrew, so this is translated. It said, "Emergency, going up to Jerusalem. They shall not steal the elections from us. The right is going up to Jerusalem to demonstrate support. We must not surrender the people's votes." And then at the time, they were doing it in front of the Knesset. So some people said there were 200,000 people there. I heard there were at least 100,000. You never know with these numbers if they're exaggerated, but as you know, the left is more likely to exaggerate numbers than the right. So this could be pretty accurate. I would just say in between 100,000 and 200,000 people showed up for this protest. Let's just say a lot of people were there. The demonstrators were chanting things like, "Our voice isn't less important than a pilot's. We know exactly who we voted for, and a minority of elites cannot bring the country to this point. We are one nation." They're absolutely right. Why is the minority controlling the ones who are protesting? Itamar Ben-Gvir tweeted, he said, "Today the right stopped sitting on the sidelines and being silent. The right is usually indifferent to demonstrations and active at the polls," as we could see from the election that took place in November. He went on to say, "But when they want to cancel our vote, when they try to steal the election results from us, when they tell us that our vote is second class, this is the result." So apparently there's another one planned for a Thursday night. Hopefully their voice will be heard and that Netanyahu will continue the process of putting forth through the judicial reforms. This is very, very important. As you guys know, Netanyahu and his government were elected democratically, and they need to listen to the voice of the people who elected them, not just the voice of the people who are demonstrating in the streets and who a lot of them don't even know what they're protesting about. I read an article from JNS, Jewish News Syndicate. I thought this article was really good. I want to read a quote from the article. It said this: "The anti-Bibi resistance was able to sell the world a false narrative about their efforts being nothing more than a successful effort to defend democracy against the efforts of the would-be authoritarians who wanted to create a fascist, theocratic state." They're absolutely right. The left have been selling the lies that the right are trying to take over. They're trying to make a dictatorship. They're trying to create a fascist, theocratic state, when these are absolute lies coming from the left, from the leaders of the left, and even from the media here in Israel, which is awful. The article went on to say, "But the notion that an uprising of the people has stopped a coup by Netanyahu and his allies is pure projection. What the world has just witnessed was itself a soft coup, fueled by contempt for the nationalist and religious voters whose ballots gave Netanyahu's coalition a clear Knesset majority in November and imputing to them their own desire for crushing political opponents. The cultural left has shown that it has an effective veto over the results of a democratic election." I think that sums up perfectly what is happening, the issues that are going on here. Last night, President Isaac Herzog, the one who was supposed to be apolitical, but who called on Netanyahu to stop the judicial reforms, he held the first round of negotiations between the opposition and the coalition. The negotiations about the judicial reforms and moving forward from here. He held it at his residence last night. He's planning to meet with other negotiating teams from the other political parties in the Knesset later on this week. I guess we'll see where this goes. He wants compromise. He's always been sort of middle left, and the U.S. wants compromise. It seems everyone wants compromise. But I guess the question is here, should the government compromise on this issue, or is it something that important that should be pushed forward? Guys, I know we're running out of time here, but in some other news, Ron DeSantis is coming to Israel in April. So the Jerusalem Post and the Museum of Tolerance are doing an event, and they announced that DeSantis would serve as the keynote speaker on April 27th for their event. In a statement to the Jerusalem Post, DeSantis noted the tensions between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he stressed that Florida's continued unwavering support to the Jewish people. He said this, quote, "At a time of unnecessarily strained relations between Jerusalem and Washington, Florida serves as a bridge between the American and Israeli people." Guys, as you know, not only is a strong supporter of Israel, but he also supports the Jewish people's rights to live in their biblical heartland, Judea and Samaria, which there are very, very few politicians who support Judea and Samaria, or as the world calls it, the West Bank. There are very few politicians who support this, so this is very bold of Ron DeSantis to make this move that is against mainstream, you could say. He said in a conference last year, he absolutely shattered the lie that Israel is occupying the West Bank. He said this: "I don't care what the State Department said. They are not occupied territory. It is disputed territory." That's it right there. Guys, make sure to subscribe. Get the conversation going down below. Make sure to check out our last Heartland rally, which is tomorrow night. Go to theisraelguys.com/rally to RSVP, or you can click the link, which will be down in the description below. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening in the land of Israel. We'll be back every Monday through Friday with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.